Welcome back to this day, the 19th of September, where the country is getting ready to bid farewell to the former Minister Pravin Gordhan. And there's been so much said, and certainly a lot has been said in terms of lauding his political activism and his roles in public office in his various positions that he held, whether it be from the role he took at CODESA, whether it was as he was a SARS commissioner, which he has really been spoken about as somebody who completely reformed that system and actually got global recognition for the work that he did. And then, of course, moving into different ministerial positions from the finance minister into what he was at public enterprises. There were many portfolios he held, but it wasn't an easy ride. It certainly wasn't. And his role as well was one where we heard Dr. Vilakazi, and she was where we left off this conversation, Dr. Fikile Vilakazi, political analyst, who's joining us via link. But of course, in studio here is Sophie Mokoena, who's SABC News International Editor. We were speaking about his role for the international community. And, you know, at the time, during those years of state capture, it was exceptionally difficult for South Africa. We were being downgraded. Countries were basically blocking us. I remember when there were those forums that were being held where you would go and build these stands for people to come and visit South Africa and invest in South Africa. People were speaking to the lack of visitors that even wanted to attend a stand or even go and look at the stand for South Africa. And this was a very difficult time. Sophie, perhaps you want to reflect on this. Those times that the minister was tasked with what many had seen as an almost impossible mission.
Well, you heard what Dr. Stavrov said earlier on in terms of how difficult it was during that time. I remember he delivered a budget and he had to dash to join the international roadshow, where he was going to calm the international investors and also try to manage the moment where the rating agency wanted to really downgrade South Africa. And it was going to be a disaster because nobody would invest in a country that has been downgraded. And he was criticized by members of parliament for not staying for the debate. The other critical issue is that when he went to London, and that will continue to be a historic moment because upon arrival, then he got a message from the DG of the presidency that he must come back as per the directive of Jacob Zuma because he was the president of the country. And I remember even media endured pressure from those who were close to President Jacob Zuma that perhaps this trip is a waste of resources for coverage. But as SABC, we insisted that if he gets fired while he's in London, it is a story because then we can speak to him. And therefore, we continue to cover that trip. Today in the archives, you have that story of Pravin in London at the moment when he was recalled and him spending just few hours in London but continue to address the investors and take the next plane the same day to return back to South Africa. And therefore it was really a difficult time for him. And you spoke about the SOEs. I mean, you inherit this carcass, you know, based on what was happening in the SOEs. If you recall, it was the DA, the Economic Freedom Fighters, who fought that he be brought back to try and manage the mess that was happening in terms of the economy after the appointment of Des van Rooyen. And therefore, you will have different views. And in politics, Leanne, one thing that you must know is that politicians can be very inconsistent. And that is why sometimes their legacy towards the end gets tainted, because in politics, there are no permanent friends or permanent enemies, just permanent interest. And therefore, there's a mood swing. And I am not surprised today that those who put that spirited fight to support him during the state capture moment and many other challenging times, today they are again very vocal against what he did in his twilight years and the mistakes that Dr. Snuki Zigalala has admitted to, that as human being you can't be perfect, you will err. And the issue of Takatso will continue to be a black spot in terms of his legacy. Yeah. But the reality is South Africa has gone through lots and lots of challenges, and the leadership of this country, no one is unscathed.
And let's, Dr. Vilakazi, let's turn tack a little bit, because we've been speaking very much so about and lauding Pravin Gordhan, which he certainly does deserve. But there are a lot of critics against him, and I think it would be very hard and amiss of us not to talk to some of the criticism that has been levelled against him. You know, some saying that towards the end he became very stubborn in his ways, that he became somewhat of a dictator in his rulership. He wouldn't listen to people. He would sort of take over conversations and not take advice. You know, these are the words and the utterances that we're being, you know, are being spoken to. I mean, we could also look at the role that he played in the appointments of his daughter in certain institutions and other things. So I don't want to ignore some of those aspects of the legacy of Gordhan. But perhaps you want to talk to that, those last few years where it was difficult to understand what actually was going on.
Certainly, Leanne, I think history will hold us accountable if we do not speak about those components of the story. And I think that it's sad, you know, that we're talking about it over a body of someone that has passed. I think we need to say that we are doing it as a result from a place of deep respect and honor and recognition of the mourning by the family and friends and loved ones. But I think that there's a story that is that also emerges here. I mean, from Takatso itself, if you look at the negotiations around Takatso and South African Airways, these negotiations are really happening at a pivotal time where there've been protests, even within the workers of South African Airways, issues around the treatment of labor power within the institution. And then it emerges that he has negotiated SAA away. South Africans would know that when we're talking about the Takatso deal, we are talking about a deal where, in the hands of Mr. Pravin Gordhan, we got to know that Takatso was offered 51% of the deal, where government then would have owned 49% of the deal. And what that means in practical terms is that we are having a state-owned enterprise here in the form of South African Airways now being literally handed over in a platter to the hands of business. And of course, that's got a lot of implications in terms of negotiation of salaries for workers within the SAA itself, but also negotiation of the role of government in terms of the contributions that go from the taxpayers' money into negotiating those deals, but also the charges, the prices, the FS, the treatment within the SAA itself, having been known as a flight of the state. And of course, now we begin to see different types of treatment. So there's many other implications. And I think we need to then surface that, particularly Leanne, within a socio-economic environment and a macroeconomic framework that South Africans have been against, which has tended to be neoliberal really since 1994. And I think Minister Pravin Gordhan, having been part of the negotiations of CODESA, having been really in the different state institutions in terms of leadership, because he's been playing the role of chairperson, by the way, even in the international community. He was party to these conversations. And for him to eventually end up with a deal like Takatso that says 51% to a business sector, in an environment in South Africa where we are saying a neoliberal economic framework has actually exacerbated a state of poverty in the country. It has deepened inequalities, you know, between those who are rich and poor. And then you are giving 51% of SAA to business, further enriching the very few minority that own the economy of the country. So those controversies existed, and it existed in the name of Minister Pravin Gordhan, who was trusted as a chief negotiator in terms of being a shareholder representing the state. And I think it's a story that we have to say to the Africans that there's then deep disappointment and deep sadness within the political fraternity, but generally within the public, to say, we trusted you, Minister Pravin Gordhan, but you have let us down. And that dark cloud, as Sophie says, I think is something that will stay. Issues of nepotism. Leanne, there have been allegations that he, like many other politicians, has made offers and opportunities available to his own daughter. You don't do those kinds of things. I think when you take political office and political leadership, there's a particular standard of character and standard of reputation that is expected from us as political figures, as political leaders, as those who represent the public, to say, even if it is tempting, however much it is, we should not be seen to be the ones that compromise ethical standards of public governance. And I think in doing that, again, he dropped the ball there to say he was not able to be that kind of a person that people are ululating about, to say he's an amazing figure, he's led in the ways that we all accept that he has in the liberation fight and also in governance of South Africa post-1994. So there are those glitches that also exist against his name. And I think it's sad. It's a sad reality in a sense that it's not just about Minister Pravin Gordhan, but we see that it always happens within a particular institution of a political system. In this particular instance, which has been the ruling party, a political system also which has been state capture, a political system also which is not just the capture of the state, but it also within an international community that is determined, Leanne, that is determined from a place of economic oppression to ensure that those who are subjugated economies of the South, those who are subjugated economies of the global, what you call the developing world, including South Africa or emerging economies, continue to rely on those who own the majority of wealth in the world, which is in the hands of minority governments, what we call your major important governments. So Pravin Gordhan, minister, was that kind of a person, and unfortunately,
It is quite, yeah, Dr. Vilakazi, I'm going to have to interrupt and stop you there, but I think you've given us a lot of food for thought on this particular occasion, as you say. I mean, we need to look at all different aspects of the legacy of the minister and the story. It's a long story. It's one that certainly is one that spans decades, and towards the end, unfortunately, there were these stories coming through, and it's very hard to ignore them. But Dr. Vilakazi, your insights have been amazing. Thank you very, very much for joining us here on the program. Sophie, I know that you are rejoining the coverage from 9 o'clock this morning, so we'll get more live coverage on the SABC as we continue, but we are still with you here on Morning Live as we cover the life and times of Minister Pravin Gordhan. We're going to take a break, and we're bringing you more after this. Do stay tuned.